Awesome. Well, welcome to Clock Convos.
We have a special guest today, Andy Greenfield, who is both Sheila and I's mentor and one of our earliest mentors, also a Colgate alumni and serial entrepreneur. So thank you so much, Andy, for talking with us today.
Great to be here, guys.
Hey guys, this is Sheila and Maya Dunn, and you're listening to Clock Combos. Let's go, guys. Let's get it done, bitches.
So I guess to start off, if you could just give, just for our audience to hear like a quick background about you, anything you want to share about yourself, and yeah.
Sure. I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, went to Danbury High School, Colgate University, decided I was going to be a philosophy professor. So I went to Brown University for graduate school. And when I got out, the market for philosophers, you needed an electron microscope to find. So at that point, I started my business career.
At what point did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur or go into the world of business?
Actually, I never used the word entrepreneur to describe myself till probably I was in my late 40s, early 50s. I came from a generation of people who just did stuff. We never kind of said, "Wow, I want to be an entrepreneur." I wanted to be a philosophy professor and a professional skier, and I damaged my knees, so I couldn't do the skiing part, and there was no jobs for philosophers. But I started doing entrepreneurial stuff when I was a really little kid, but never really thought about that. We just did stuff.
Would you say it's something looking back that you kind of could tell that you were sort of a natural entrepreneur, or did it sort of become like on accident that way?
It was only in retrospect when I look back on my life. At a certain point, I said, "Wow, I kept starting businesses and doing that kind of stuff." I had to be candid. I had very little self awareness of that. It may sound oversimple, but I just, hey, my father had a snowblower. I said, okay, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to start a little snow blowing business and blow all the driveways that my neighbors had. This was in the days when we had snow.
One thing I read about you seem to say like entrepreneurship is something that is kind of in your blood. Like it just simply is. Do you think, like with that in mind, do you think you can learn entrepreneurship or like acquire entrepreneurship if you weren't born with that mindset? Like, oh, there's a snowblower, I'm just gonna go make money.
Yeah. Let me put it this way. I think there are natural entrepreneurs. If I'm not to put you guys on the spot, but I think, you guys have that in your blood. Comes down probably, I don't know, from dad, mom, grandpa. Um, my Both of my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. My father was a doctor, but he worked for himself. All of my uncles were in business for themselves, but we never called it that. But I think a good analogy is athletes. There are natural athletes
Mm.
who just, it doesn't matter. I've never played tennis. Give them a tennis racket, and all of a sudden they're doing pretty well. And there are grinders. Somebody who says, I'm going to learn to play tennis. I may not be naturally gifted, and I'm going to work hard. And I think both of those types of entrepreneurs can be successful. But there are certain who are naturals. We have, for example, our classmate, Ryan Smith.
Hmm.
He's just a guy who has it in his DNA. And I think one thing you see with entrepreneurs who kind of have that in their blood, their reflexes are very good. Their entrepreneurial reflexes, they go in the right direction.
Like their intuition almost?
Yeah, and they these are folks who, for example, will see a problem or have a problem in their business or their venture, and their reflex is to solve it or try and solve it. As opposed to there are folks who have a problem and their reflex is to, I have a problem, and they walk to somebody and say, hey, we've got a problem. The program at Colgate had 500 plus young entrepreneurs come through the program. In my business, which is an early stage venture fund, we are dealing with scores of entrepreneurs every month, early stage. And you see after a while patterns emerge, and some people just naturally have it. They naturally know how to articulate benefits rather than features. They're natural salespeople. So there's some people who have just natural gifts.
So when we were planning for this episode, there was 100 different directions we thought we could have gone in. I want to touch on your business experience, entrepreneurial experience, building and selling 3 companies in 10 years. But part of what I think will allow us to go in that direction is talking about timing of when you start a business and launch a business, especially because you have also, to give more background. So Andy is the founder of Thought into Action, which was probably the best thing that I've gotten out of Colgate. Maya can speak for herself, but Thought into Action, so the entrepreneurial program at Colgate. So I think I looked at a stat, this might be updated now, but 592 entrepreneurs have gone through the program in the past 11 years. And so obviously Andy's worked with countless entrepreneurs and also started several businesses. So in the context of timing, can you talk us through like how important timing is when you're starting a business and thinking about like if it's the right time to bring it to market and how successful it's going to be?
Yeah, I can. I'm not sure you're going to like the answer. There's an old saying, it's better to be lucky than good. So timing is super important, but regrettably, we cannot control macroeconomic conditions. I'd ask you to do a thought experiment. Suppose you decide you're going to launch a travel agency, and 3 months later, the internet explodes, and you're going, oh my God. Or it could have been a year ago, you've pooled all your money and you launch a restaurant. And 3 months after you launch, you're forced to close. So these are things we can't control. The only thing we can do is do our very best to execute. You can try and anticipate trends. You can try and draft off of trends. These are all things that we can see. The challenge is the things you can't see. Some of those you can pivot and take advantage of. I mean, I was built my online business in 1999. If I had had more resources and hung on to it for another 6 months, the value of that business would have dropped dramatically. And I mean, moving that decimal point a number of directions to the left because the internet bubble had burst.
So this is just a question that I feel like Sheila and I and our families talks about a lot, or entrepreneurs maybe in general. But would you say that like some of it is accounted to luck then? Or do you think that luck plays a role?
Yes, but there's another famous saying, luck favors the well-prepared. And I'm full of famous sayings. The New Jersey Lotto theme line was, you got to be in it to win it. So you folks have heard me say, great entrepreneurs are like great baseball players, great batters. And that means they have a 300 batting average. That means 7 out of 10 times you swing and miss. So some of those times you're going to swing and miss,
right,
having nothing to do with how good you are, how great your team is. But the great entrepreneurs are resilient and persistent. You control the things you can control, and you try and plan for the things you can't control.
How would you say, how do you think entrepreneurs can be prepared the best. How did you do it in throughout your businesses? Do you have a specific time where you felt you've been very prepared for what was thrown at you, and then a time that you might not have been?
I'd like, in hindsight, I'm a genius,
Okay.
but the truth is, what I lacked was what we tried to create at Colgate, which was mentors.
Mm.
If I told you guys all the mistakes I had made, you'd be cringing. These are mistakes that you guys don't make.
Well,
Some of them you don't make because you've got good instincts. Um, my mentor was experience, and they used to say, how do you develop good judgment? Experience. How do you get experience? Bad judgment. So the the best advice I can give, which you guys are great at, by the way, is surround yourselves with people who have been there and done that.
Mm.
Surround yourselves with people who have seen 100 movies and know how they end. Surround yourself with people who have muscles you don't have. As I mentioned, we talk to early stage founders all the time. And the ones we see that are the most likely to succeed are the ones who are fearless when it comes to reaching out to people who have more experience than they do. Because the truth is, most of these early stage companies are founded by people who have never been down the road before.
Mm.
They're playing a totally new sport. And you've heard us talk about there's two fundamental activities in doing a startup. One, creating a great product or service, which 3 teenagers can do in their garage, truth be told. The second has nothing to do with the first, and that's scaling it.
Right.
And that's where you can really get a lot of scars, fall on your face, lose millions of dollars. So that's where you want to reach out fearlessly to people around you.
Do you have, like, with that, because you've worked with so many startups and seen a lot of entrepreneurs between Colgate and everything else, do you have like a story that you always kind of it resides with you? There's like an inspiring story of being a mentor and being able to help these startups.
I've got a million stories. A lot of the lessons come from my mistakes, and a lot of the good stories come from folks from your generation. I can think of a good one. Again, mentioning our friend Ryan Smith, who after Colgate started a company called Trupoli, and his original business involved crowdfunding real estate investments. And Ryan was going around New York showing his business to a bunch of potential customers. And customer after customer said to him, I'm not really interested in the business, but this dashboard that you use to illustrate your business, I really like. Can you make that dashboard for us? And I remember Ryan and I having a conversation afterwards. He goes, they're not interested in my business, but they're interested in the dashboard I use to show my business. And I said, Ryan, you're hearing the market talk. Question is, are you listening? And he listened, and he built a company, and he sold it very quickly. That was his first big success. His current business is going to be and is a much bigger success.
One thing we talk a lot about on this podcast and one of our recent episodes was like how to use adversity and turn it into something better, turn it into something successful. And I saw one of your lessons in the speech you sent over was when the world changes under your feet, change with it, use adversity as a springboard. So I thought that can kind of be tied into like what's going on in the world right now with the craziness and COVID, of course. Have you seen, like, being a mentor, how people are able to adapt? And like, I guess, obviously COVID's been terrible, but though some good can come out of it, and we have to hope that some good can come out of it. So have you seen like an adaptation that you're impressed with or anything like that?
Sure, I've seen a lot, and what we're seeing is kind of CEOs now kind of falling into two camps. We like to say, anyone can look like a genius when, the wind is in their sails, the sun is shining, and everything's calm and nice. Uh, but the mark of a real leader is what happens when, the stuff hits the fan. When your mast breaks, when the waves get big, when your engine dies and you're stuck in the middle of the ocean. So we have seen leaders who have kind of gone, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And one of the challenges is when you're a leader, everyone in your organization, whether you know it or feel it or not, is looking to you for guidance, for leadership, for strength, and for direction. So the burden on a leader becomes not just how do I navigate out of here, but how do I, as a leader, make sure my team feels safe, inspired, that they have a direction. So we've seen a cadre of leaders kind of go, oh my God, things were going great and now I don't know what to do. We've seen a cadre of leaders say, you know what? Let me put my feet up, think for a few minutes about how I can harness the adversity, how perhaps I can reconfigure my platform to be hands-free or operate within a remote environment, in a remote environment. Oh, as recently as last night, Wills and I were on about 8 o'clock. We went to a place called Nowhere, which is in beta form now, but it's a fascinating world created out of Zoom fatigue. It's led by a brilliant, very creative guy, and all of a sudden, instead of sitting looking like this, it still heads. You've got I could say, hey Maya, let's go over into the forest and have a chat while Sheila goes and looks for somebody to raise money from the next venture. And we then can meet, we can move around. I mentioned this, not, I don't know if we'll invest in it or not, but it was created out of people going, if I'm going to put a bullet in my head if I have another Zoom call. So again, whether that's successful or not, who knows? But we've all talked together about the number of pivots you make as a leader. The pivot may be driven by consumer related issues, needs, wants, hopes, aspirations. It may be driven by new competitors entering the market. Or in this case, it may be driven by macroeconomic events, externalities you can't control.
Switching gears a little bit, we've mentioned sort of failure and also success a couple times throughout this episode. Can you point to a time in your life when you thought like you've made it, you're satisfied, and then like how you would define success?
Sure, I can point to lots of times I felt satisfied. And do you know how long that feeling lasts? About 10, 15 seconds. When I sold my first company, and it was one of those situations where I literally was running out of money. It was all my own money. In those days, you did it with your own money. I had mortgaged my house, borrowed against whatever assets I had built in my entire career. And I was a month from running out of money and being bust. And some good things happened, and I sold the world's first online market research company at the peak of the internet bubble. And all of a sudden I sat and said, wow, I actually never have to work again. And I felt pretty good that night. And the next morning I woke up and I went to work. And I thought to myself, we got to go kick some ass and make a deal now. So I went back to work. I ended up taking a week off. I decided I was going to give myself a reward. So I got myself a larger jet ski and went back to building my consulting business and starting another business. to be honest, I started three more businesses in pretty rapid succession, and they all failed. I was suffering from what I would call acute hubris. I thought, Jesus, I'm a genius. And I violated many of the rules and recommendations that I've given you guys. Uh, but I learned some lessons there.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I think, like people think of like entrepreneurship, or some people might want to start the company just to like sell it and exit and everything, and that's great. But it's interesting to hear from other people what how they went through success, and like if they really felt satisfied, or if it's just kind of a constant like I just will keep working and keep pushing to build something bigger and better.
Well, part of it depends on what feeds your soul.
Right.
And if money is the issue, and for some people it is, um, they want to get to some number, and that's fine. For many of us, money is a byproduct of doing stuff you love. You've heard me describe, you know, entrepreneurship is kind of modern alchemy. And you guys have experienced, it's a hell of a buzz to create something that didn't exist and then keep doing it. I'm 68, and I should have hung up my spurs a long time ago. I thought my last startup was thought into action at Colgate, and then, 6.5 years ago, Bob Gold came to Wills and I and said, "You guys are pretty good at this. You guys should start an early stage fund." And we're about to launch our third early stage venture fund, and I'm talking to entrepreneurs all day. And just 3 hours ago, I said to Wills, I said, we have the coolest job in the world. We're watching motivated, talented, kick-ass folks, generally half my age or younger,
Hmm.
create the future. Give birth to things that will change lives, and we have the opportunity to sit and help them do it. So, I mean, that's feeds my soul, and it gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, and just from like hearing about that, and like knowing what you and Wills have been doing, it's so hopeful for me when I hear about that. It's like kind of like paying it forward. Like you hear about these successful entrepreneurs that then were mentors or investing in startups, and it's just I think it's like a very cool cycle when it comes down to it, of just helping each other out. But
I think it's important
yeah.
because, we are all very, very lucky. The three of us, I'm guessing most of your audience. I taught ethics to seventh graders for 3 years. And it was a private school. These were kids who came from families who could afford that. And, I was trying to impart the lesson. I didn't quite know how. And then when I had an epiphany about the fact that we don't necessarily deserve what we have. We have what we have. And I'd ask the kids, how many of you chose your parents? The answer is zero. How many of you chose to be born in America? No one did. I mean, they could have been born in South Sudan in a hut with no medical services. How many of you chose to be born in, 1990, whenever they were? I said, how many of you have had an ear infection? Every hand went up. I said, do you know if you were born 200 years ago, a quarter of you would have died, half of you would be deaf? So what we have, we're fortunate to have. We don't necessarily deserve. Lots of people work hard. So what that means to me is that we have a responsibility to share with those who haven't been as fortunate. Or we have a responsibility to share what we've learned and help lift other people up. It's the way you make the world better. And as an entrepreneur, I've made, a lot of mistakes. And if I can take those mistakes and use them to help somebody else realize their dream or create something that changes the world, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we talk about in your presentation you sent over the story of when you did sell Greenfield Online, and after talking with the janitor the few days before, I thought that was just such an inspiring story. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I had, we had started a company back in 1993 called Greenfield Online, and it, the idea, we didn't even know what the internet was back then. You know, 1,000 people had emails, and into my office walked a 19-year-old Fairfield University sophomore named Hugh Davis, who was also a brilliant guy. And he said, "There's this thing called the internet." We didn't know what it was. He explained that you could interact with people over, remotely. You could ask them questions. You could survey them. So we started a company, the world's first online market research company, and this was like building a car when no one had ever built a car. We didn't know what we needed to do, so we created a piece of it, and then it's like somebody says, "Yeah, but you need wheels." And we go, "Wheels? Okay." So we built the company, and around 1996, we had built the software, we had a panel, and we started doing projects for free. And it was hard to give them away. And one day I had gone to New York and I spoke to Colgate Palmolive, Procter and Gamble, GM. I forgot a bunch of like the world's major marketers, three of them. And every one of them said the same thing. They said, "Andy, this internet stuff is cool, but it's really for techies. We are mass marketers. We need a mass audience." Now we're sitting here in 2021 laughing because the internet is the ultimate mass audience. But back then, they thought, this is weird stuff. So I got on the train. I came back to my office in Westport. It was 8 p.m, and I thought, God, I've mortgaged everything I have to do this. And if I can't sell projects, I can't even give them away, what am I going to do? And maybe it's not a mass medium. So I go into my office and I start pruning my bonsai tree, which was my version of therapy. And in walks a guy named Tom Kruger. And Tom was the building janitor. And he and I would always chat. And he started giving me tips on how to take care of the bonsai. And I said, "Do you have bonsais, Tom?" He goes, No. My daughter, Heather, who was 11 years old, has them. And she and her friends are always exchanging tips. And he mentions a friend in, Korea, another one in Germany. And I said, "Oh, what branch of the service were you in?" Because for a janitor to have been all over the world, he goes, No, I wasn't in the service. I said, "Well, how does Heather have these friends?" And he goes, "Oh, there's this thing called the internet. She's on it all the time with her friends." And in that split second, the light bulb went off. I thought to myself, the world's smartest marketers are wrong. This will be a mass medium. And instead of closing my company, which I decided to do on the train, I put my foot down on the gas. And the funny thing is that there's a couple other funny pieces of the story, and just talking about karma and going full circle. After I sold Greenfield Online, I invited Tom into my office. Unbeknownst to me, my office manager had reported him to the building owner for doing something bad. And he walked into my office thinking he was going to get yelled at. And I was giving him an envelope that had 2 years worth of his salary in it as a way of saying thank you. He didn't want to take the envelope from me. He thought it was a summons or something. He finally took it, and and I said, "Tom, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have just sold, the world's first online market research company." And it goes even farther, because about 5 or 6 years later, my wife and I have a foundation called the Everyday Heroes Foundation that gives scholarships to kids who have overcome adversity. And I was at one of the high schools in Norwalk. It was a high school for kind of last chance kids, interviewing a candidate. And so a nice young woman, all tatted up, and I'm interviewing her, and she goes, "Mr. Greenfield, you don't remember me?" And I go, and I'm looking and I see Heather Kruger. I go, "Heather, you're Tom's daughter?" She goes, "Yeah. She was the girl who gave her dad the tips on the bonsai."
Wow.
So
Wow.
you can probably guess she got the scholarship.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That
Yeah.
is full circle.
What would you just like any so our audiences um, generally we found like 15 to 25-year olds. Would you have like just I know this is kind of like a vague question, but a statement of just like advice for somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur or wants to start something or has this passion but hasn't done it yet?
Sure. The I'm much more interested in what comes below the neck than above the neck. Because below the neck is where you feel, it's where passion emerges, where you feel pain, where you feel drive, where you feel fear. It's where problems ultimately hit you. So think about what it is that either bugs you, a wish you have, where you sit and you go, I wish that, or if only. And take that and try and figure out how to solve it. Don't worry about whether you think you can do it or not. Just do it. Nike stumbled on something. I think it's kind of the entrepreneur's credo. Just do it. You guys may remember we sometimes refer to what we do at Thought into Action at Colgate as the craft of doing. I tell people, don't look left, don't look right, don't look behind you. Just move forward and do it. There's the only thing stopping a 15-year-old from creating an amazing product, service, or company is themselves. No one's saying, Sheila, Maya, you can't start this company. That comes from the only person who's doing that is the person you see in the morning when you're brushing your teeth and looking in the mirror.
Right.
So one thing we sometimes say is entrepreneurs are fearless. It's not that they're brave necessarily, but they just do it. They don't sit and go, oh, geez, it might not work. It might assume it's not going to work the first, second, or third time. The other thing we always say is, what's the very worst that can happen? That what you're trying to do doesn't work, or that you lose a little bit of money. And the good news is if you're 15 to 25, you probably don't have that much money to lose. But there's two kinds of thinking that if you look at a person's lifetime, there's fluid thinking and crystallized thinking. Crystallized thinking is more what people my age or over 45 or 50 have. It's crystallized because you've seen a lot of movies. You can identify patterns. But fluid thinking, which is represented by you guys and your cohort that listens to you, that's the kind of thinking that looks and can connect dots to solve problems and to address pain. And the final thought I would give is this: don't create vitamins, create painkillers. Create something that if it was taken away from your customer, they would use foul language, they would scream, they would fight. One of the tools that we do that drives our investment decision, one of the tools we use, is something called a deprivation exercise. So when we do customer diligence, when we're thinking about investing in a company, we're talking to a customer and we say to them, and what we do a little exercise. We say, you may have heard that this product you're using, they're going to be taking it down for the next 8 months, but it'll probably be back. And then we sit back and we see what kind of reaction we get. If we hear, well, that's too bad, I really liked it, make sure they contact me when they come back. That tells us that the customer is intellectually engaged, above the neck. If they go, NFW, no, that's going to put me in the shitter. Then we know the person or the entrepreneur has truly created a pain reliever and is addressing an important problem. And that's when, for us, the investment bell rings.
Thanks so much, Andy. This was awesome to talk with you. For everyone, yeah, Andy was one of our earliest mentors and someone who I would think of as a hero in my eyes, someone I look up to in a lot of ways. So thank you so much, Andy. I'm really happy you could join us.
It was a delight being here, and the truth is, working with guys like you is what feeds the stuff inside. And I'm what I'm looking forward to is watching you ring the bell down at the New York Stock Exchange one of these days.
One day.
Well, hey guys, great seeing you. Thanks for engaging me in this.
Yeah, thank you so much again, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.